Hello and welcome to day 2 of the Summer of SABR Golden Celebration series as we continue to celebrate our 50th anniversary. I'm your host for the day, SABR CEO Scott Bush, and today we are excited to bring you a panel on the Negro Leagues as Major Leagues, the SABR annual business meeting, and a member social hour. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. Please keep your video off and the sound on mute until we get to the social hour portion of the programming. This will ensure everyone can see the speakers and the speakers are not interrupted. If you have questions for any of our presenters today, please use the chat function and keep additional comments to a minimum in the chat. For anyone who would benefit from closed captioning, it is available by clicking the live transcript button on the lower right of your Zoom screen. Finally, I do want you to know that this meeting is being recorded and will be made available to the public at a later date. Okay, so with the housekeeping finished, let's get our programming underway. Our panel today focuses on the Negro Leagues as Major Leagues and is moderated by Dr. Raymond Doswell, the Vice President of Curatorial Services at the Negro League Baseball Museum. Dr. Doswell has a BA from Monmouth College, an MA from California Riverside, and received his doctorate from Kansas State. I can think of no one better to moderate this conversation than Raymond, who has worked for the Negro League Baseball Museum since 1995. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Doswell.
Thank you, Scott Bush, and welcome, baseball fans. We're glad to be with you this afternoon. I'm Ray Doswell from the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in Kansas City, but as maybe you can tell from my background, I am on location in the heartland of America, St. Louis, Missouri, my hometown, next to the baseball cathedral that is Busch Stadium 3. There is a live game going on right now. So we will do our best to moderate the discussion. While the action comes, you might hear crowd noise, and if the Cardinals are successful with a home run, there will be loud explosions of fireworks, which we just had as Paul DeYoung just hit one out. Cardinals are up 2-0 over the Pirates. So we will do our best to limit those distractions while we talk about this particular occasion. But I am in St. Louis for a relevant occasion. I was actually, and that's why I'm here in town, because the St. Louis Cardinals yesterday dedicated a ball field in honor of the Negro Leagues. Harris Stowe State University, a historically Black college here in St. Louis, is on the site of Old Stars Park, which was for the St. Louis Stars baseball team in the Negro Leagues. And the Cardinals, with the help of the university and other sponsors, dedicated a new ball field for the college baseball and softball teams. And we had a ceremony there yesterday. You could see coverage of that on the Cardinals website at MLB.com. I was honored to be part of that, and it's a wonderful occasion. And we thank the Cardinals for that support of the St. Louis Stars history and preserving that history. So we're very excited to be here for that and to be here with you to discuss the Negro Leagues as Major Leagues. We're very pleased to have with us today on our panel Scott Simkus, who is with seamheads.com, the Negro Leagues database site. Scott is also an author in baseball history. We're also fortunate to have Sean Forman from Sports Reference. And Sports Reference is managing the Sports Reference and Baseball Reference baseball sites, which I'm sure many of you use in your work and in your research. We are hopeful to be also joined by Negro League historian and chair of the SABR Negro Leagues Committee, Larry Lester, an author of many books as well. And so we hope to hear from him and see him. If not, we will carry on with Scott and Sean, and of course, your questions, which we hope we will have in the chat. So we're going to start a bit in the middle. And I see Larry joining us. Thank you, Larry, for joining us. We'll be with you very shortly. We want to start a little bit in the middle. Last December, December 2020, we had an announcement from Major League Baseball in the commissioner's office. I'm going to read part of it to you. As all of us who love baseball have long known, the Negro Leagues produce many of our game's best players, innovations, and triumphs against a backdrop of injustice. We are now grateful to count the players of the Negro Leagues where they belong, as major leaguers within the official historical record. And to be specific, what Major League Baseball says that they have elevated 7 of the Negro Leagues, and they include the Negro National League, the first iteration, which lasted from 1920 to 1931. The Eastern Colored League, which is recorded from lasting from 1923 to 1928. The American Negro League, their one season in 1929, the East-West League of 1932, the Negro Southern League of 1932, the second iteration of the Negro National League, which was 1933 to 1948, and finally, the Negro American League from 1937 to 1948. So the scope is 1920 to 1948. Now we know that there were leagues and attempts at leagues before that, going back to the end of the previous century, the late 1800s into the 1900s. We know that there were teams that were existing well after 1948 and leagues operating after that. And I think it's fair to include in this discussion today the parameters of that, the scope of these decisions and why that happened, and why the limits on the inclusions are the information that's there to why the other parts of the history were not included. I think that's fair for our discussion. But I see this as more of a nuts and bolts discussion today about some of those decisions. I think it's also it is fair to debate why Major League Baseball made this decision in the first place, why they wanted to make this decision, the timing of that decision, whether they should have made this decision. But I think for today, the decision is made, and we want to get into the nuts and bolts of the decision itself, the nature of the research, what is available now to research, and what other researchers can do moving forward. So that's the crux of the debate today with the time that we have, and we'll save some of those other discussions for another day. So with that in mind, we'll turn to Mr. Lester first, and thanks for joining us. Larry, I'd like to ask you, and I know this is mostly a SABR audience, so we pretty much may know the answer, but can you just give us a sense of what is the raw data? What is the state of the raw data for research? And I know you've been working on this a long time. What is the state of it? What does it look like? What are you mining to get to these statistical records?
First of all, thank you for having me on this Zoomcast, but I'd like to take a moment to honor Kathleen Ashwell. Her funeral is going on as we speak. It started at 2 o'clock today. She's the mother of Gary Ashwell, one of the principals at Seamhead. So I want to take a moment to recognize her passing. As far as the raw data, it was simply something that I set out to do in 1972, is to copy box scores out of all the Black newspapers I could find via microfilm, and make copies, tabulate them by hand. We didn't have Excel back then, and surely didn't have the internet. So at the time, it seemed like a good thing to do. I was just curious about how great these ball players that I heard so much about. You know, as I was fortunate to go to school with Satchel Paige's daughters and play basketball with his son, and had Buck O'Neill's wife as my grade school teacher. So lived in the neighborhood with a lot of former Negro League players. And so I heard the stories, the myths, the mythology, the embellished truths, and always curious just to how truly great were these ball players. And so I had to get that raw data. And that's what it was, very raw. And here we are today, 49 years later, talking about finalizing that data. And I don't know, have the percentages for you, Dr. Doswell, but we're close, we're very close.
Indeed, and you've been mining it for a long time. What were the particular challenges and sources that you look through? Well, what are the sources that you look through? I mean, obviously there's newspapers, but anything unique as far as sources for finding data, and what were the challenges in getting at some of that source material?
Well, it was very simple. We just order what they call interlibrary loan, order the microfilm from the various cities to put them on your microfilm machine. You scroll through frame by frame until you find the game, and then you drop a dime in the machine and hit the lotto and print it out. So you build your own schedule. The Negro Leagues, they printed a schedule in the spring, but it was fluid, it would change. So you had to make your own schedule as you went along with cancellations, with rainouts and what have you. So it was a tedious process, one that I loved doing. I was the type of person who grew up near the ballpark. So I attended many, many games by myself because I wanted to keep score. And, you know, for 15 cents, you get a scorecard with a little bitty pencil, and I sat in the stand and I would keep score and strategize alongside the manager. So it made me feel good when he made a pitching change. I either agreed or disagreed with him because I was keeping score along with everybody else at that time. It was an interesting time in my life, and I enjoyed it. You know, I might go to 50 games a year. I was within walking distance, so it was no challenge for me. And back then we didn't have crime, and I could come home anytime at night and just chill and watch the fireworks. And it was a wonderful childhood, you know, growing up in an all-black neighborhood, going to an all-black church, an all-black high school, and no issues whatsoever. So God is good.
Indeed, an idyllic setting for you. Off the top of your head, how many, especially since you use interlibrary loan, probably getting newspapers and periodicals, just off the top of your head, about how many different different newspapers did you engage to gather a lot of this material? And I know a lot of it is listed in his book, the Negro Leagues book, volume 2, as well, which you can get online and or order it digitally. But just off the top of your head, how many different numbers of newspapers and things do you think help make up the amount of records that you found so far?
Well, according to my records, I've mined data from more than 400 newspapers. I would say 390 of them were small town newspapers. Most of my data, and the majority of the data, comes from the Chicago Defender, New York Amsterdam News, Philadelphia Tribune, Kansas City Call, Pittsburgh Courier, New York Age, New York Daily Worker, St. Louis Argus. Those were the major newspapers that had most of the games. So it's been a long, tedious process, but I loved every minute of it.
And it's important to remind folks again, and I think most of our audience knows this, but like especially those key papers that you mentioned, the African American newspapers were for the most part weeklies, not dailies, not like the New York Times covering the Yankees and the Giants every day.
That's an excellent point. That makes capturing the data even more difficult because some of the dates they would list or days they would list, I found out later they were inaccurate. They said they played last Thursday, and so I would look at the calendar and pick last Thursday's date when really it was the Thursday before that. And so I had to correct my records as I went along. Scott knows the challenges of trying to nail down dates when you have a weekly newspaper. It's embarrassing when you're wrong like that, when you only provide a day of the week and not an actual day that the game was played. So fun.
We'll have fun indeed. Well, that's the nature of the challenge that we have in getting to the truth about this information. We do want to go to Scott Simkus, and Scott is at Seam Heads. I want to ask Scott first, tell us about Seam Heads and what you all do. I know you're taking some of the data from folks like Mr. Lester and trying to put it in a coherent, usable form.
Dr. Doswell, thanks for inviting me to pinch hit for Gary today. I really appreciate it. I was born just a couple of years before Larry actually started researching, so I'm a little bit later to the game. I grew up. Right. I grew up in a baseball family. My grandfather had played against the Cuban Stars in the 1930s. The first game that my father went to as a boy was Jackie Robinson's debut in Wrigley Field in Chicago in 1947. He and his father, my grandfather, went to the ballpark, and it was sold out, and they gave a police officer $5 down the by the left field bleachers, and were able to sneak in and watch the game standing room only. So, I grew up in a family that cherished baseball. We were all mediocre ball players. I continued that tradition, but we loved stats. We kind of like Larry, we would go to the game, and my dad taught me how to keep score. So I've always been interested in the data. I've always been interested in the history. And, I read Only the Ball Was White by Robert Peterson, probably in 1981 or 82, in conjunction with getting addicted to the Macmillan Baseball Encyclopedia. And kind of like Larry, I had that same hunger to want to learn more. And, because I was born a little bit later than Larry, I was the beneficiary of the work of Larry Lester and John Holloway and Dick Clark. And by the time I was in my teens, I started corresponding with Mr. Holloway in Virginia. I got his address from the Hall of Fame. And, I really wasn't in a position to do research at that point. I was still playing mediocre baseball here outside of Chicago. But a little bit later in life, in my early 30s, about 20 years ago, I became more serious about the research, and eventually bumped into Gary Ashwell and Kevin Johnson and a couple of guys online, which is how we kind of meet our colleagues these days, and became interested in the research that Gary was doing. And they were forming the Seam Heads website at that time, which was going to be, which was a place where SABR members could go and publish their work and not have to go through the whole process of being in a publication. It was just a free forum where you could go and express your research and your ideas. And that eventually turned into the repository for the database that we started to build. And, I was working as a consultant for the Stratomatic Game Company in New York around 2008, 2009, as we were trying to build a Negro League set for their board game and computer games. So that's how I became really interested in it. That's how I met the group from Seam Heads. And just over the past 10 to 12 years, our collective efforts, and of course, with Larry and Wayne Stivers, we all sort of combined forces and combined our experience and our resources. And over the course of about 10 to 12 years, I think what we have presented is the most credible Negro League database that anybody has ever seen. And it's been a really fun experience. And I don't think, maybe once or twice did we discuss the idea of the data becoming part of the official Negro or Major League record. It really was not part of the conversation. It was, how do we recapture the history? That's all we really cared about. And how do we do it right? How do we, make sure that we're as accurate as we can possibly be? So our mission was not to shake Major League Baseball and say, do this, this is the right thing. Our mission was to find the history and try to record it and try to make it accessible to people. And we did on this obscure little website called Seam Heads.
Very good. Can you remind us, and folks can go directly, and I'm sure a lot of you have used the Seam Heads database, but just, Scott, can you just remind us of which metrics you have on Seam Heads that you're measuring and including data for especially for the Negro Leaguers?
Well, Seam Heads is a little bit different than what's being presented at baseballreference.com. I mean, there's some crossover, a lot of it, but the Seam Heads database is a little bit bigger. We have some data that includes games versus major leaguers during barnstorming contests. We have games that include like AAA, AA caliber minor league teams. And we even have a little bit of semi-pro stuff that we've included in there, but it's all separated. So you can see what's Negro League, what's semi-pro, what's barnstorming against Major League. You know, the key difference, and this is probably something we'll discuss a little bit later on here in the next 45 minutes, is that our data goes back to the 19th century, that we're, you know, the page fence giants and some of the early or late 19th century African-American teams, some of the Cuban ball clubs that toured here in the United States with Jose Mendez and those guys. So it's a little bit bigger database, but clearly not all of the games are considered major league quality. So, you know, I think that's the key difference between the two sites.
Very good point. I'm going to turn back to Larry quickly before I get to Sean, but I guess you and Scott can answer this, Larry, because someone in the chat, Joe asked, when you started your research back in the 70s, were there any kind of databases or a collection of any kind of stat data back then when you started? And I guess the short answer might be no, but you could probably describe what you found when you started research back then.
Well, there was absolutely no data available to the general public. I just wanted to find out what great ball players, just how great they were. I mean, I was reading David Lippman's book on Satchel Paige when I was in high school. I read his book every night before I went to bed, and he had these ridiculous stats like 2,500 wins for Satchel Paige and 50 no-hitters. And even as a high schooler, I knew those numbers were too far off. Okay, I mean, I go to the ball game all the time, and I know how rare no-hitters are, hitting for the cycle and all that good stuff. So I enjoyed to read, but I was not convinced that Satchel Paige was as great as David Lippman had wrote about. So that encouraged me to look at the actual data and look at the newspapers. And with a pencil and a calculator and paper, I could calculate my own batting averages, my own pitching ERAs. So it was a wonderful time. I love math, and like Scott was saying, I never ever thought about publishing any data. I never thought about publishing a book or providing this to the public. I just did this because I love baseball.
So Sean, you come in now, and you all, the Sports Reference, recently had an announcement about what you're doing with Negro League data. I'd like for you to start out first, just kind of recounting that announcement and explaining what you all are doing.
Absolutely. You know, thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be here. I think the three of you have probably each forgotten more about the Negro Leagues than I will ever know. So it's I certainly am the odd person out here. You know, I would say we've had Negro League stats on our site for quite a while, working with the Hall of Fame and the Negro League Research and Authors Group database. So probably for the last 8 to 12 years, but we've always kind of treated it as something less than the Major League data that we have on the site. So it was included with foreign leagues and independent leagues and the minor leagues and college and kind of in our register section on the site. So last August, Ben Lindbergh wrote an article in the Ringer that talked about, you know, basically just asked the question, why have we never considered these, you know, some of these leagues and players to be major league players? And that really set me thinking. You know, I was interviewed for that piece and I didn't have a good answer. You know, many of these players are in the Hall of Fame. And, you know, it was clear that, to me at least, that this is something we should explore and discuss and take a hard look at. And so we actually had some discussions with seam heads that last summer about licensing their data because I knew their data set was far advanced from what we were presenting on our site. And we knew it would be a good idea to upgrade our data set there. So we were talking with them, and then kind of as a team, we decided, you know, this is something we want to explore. This is important, and we want to do this. And so we had kind of laid the groundwork, and then obviously Major League Baseball made their announcement in December. SABR had a task force that kind of, I think pushed the question as well. And so, we fully committed to the process in the spring, and were able to strike an agreement with Seam Heads in I think March of this year, and so started working on this. So about 2 weeks ago now, we basically used the Seam Heads database to augment, the white Major League data we have, the American National League, Players League, Federal League, et cetera, to include the 7 Negro Leagues that you cited earlier in the call, and include those, on our site as major leagues, as equal to the white major leagues in our presentation of them for the players, the teams, the leagues, leaderboards, et cetera, and to no longer treat them as less than as we're going forward. So I think, we have a small part in this. We really view like the researchers, Larry and Scott and Gary and Kevin and the other Seam Heads group, and also the other people that have been mentioned, people at SABR. Really, the researchers are a big part of this, the Negro League Baseball Museum as well. And then the players and the families, we want to make sure that we're respecting, their legacies. We really view for a lot of people, we're the only place where, one of the few places where you can find, their career statistics. And so we take that very seriously. So we talked to a lot of people. We were able to work with the Negro League Baseball Museum, people at the Hall of Fame, Larry, and others, to kind of make sure that we were on a good path, that we were, what we were doing was respectful to the players and their families. And it's been a wonderful project for us to be able to launch 2 weeks ago.
Very good. And I know that news, as well as the news from December, has been extremely well received just from the phone calls we get at the museum ourselves. So a lot of good questions coming into the chat, and I will get to them shortly. But I wanted to ask, and I'll start with you, Sean, but this is really for the whole panel. And this may seem like I don't want it to be too innocuous or too loaded, but a simple question. What is a Negro League? Sorry, that's not what I meant. What is a major league team? How do you describe a team or league as major in your mind?
Well, we tried to abide by the SABR task force, and I don't have all of their criteria committed to memory, but I believe, what was the level of play? Who were the players that were playing in that league? Was there a schedule? Could we point to a schedule that was being followed? Were there sufficient records to present, information about those leagues? And a few other things. Were they able to complete the season? Things like that, were at play as well. And so, this has been, I'll also point out, this has been a moving target throughout white baseball's history as well, right? You have the National Association, you have the Federal League, you have the Players League, the Union Association, which probably should not be a major league if we're, actually, reopening that discussion. So, this has been an ongoing discussion, and so, we felt comfortable with the criteria that SABR, SABR's group laid out, and that Major League Baseball matched. Not 100% sure what the process was that, if they came to that separately or not, but, we were pretty comfortable with those criteria, and that's what we decided to use. Scott
or Larry, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it comes down to talent, Dr. Doswell. I've seen, I think most of the feedback to the announcements has been positive, as you say, but there's also been negative that I have seen on social media, and I'm cool with that because that means people are talking about the Negro Leagues. And one of the points that somebody brought up was, why not the Japanese leagues now? Okay. Well, I don't think they meet the threshold for talent. The major leagues toured Japan in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, well, prior to World War II, and dominated. And the Negro Leagues also toured Asia and Japan in the 20s and 30s and dominated at the same level that the white Major League All-Star teams did as well. I mean, I think they went, Larry, you might be able to correct me, they either won 34 out of 35 or 46 out of 47 games, the Negro League All-Star teams that toured Asia. We know from the head-to-head competition between Negro League and barnstorming major leaguers that they more than held their own, probably won more than 50% of the time. So For me, the way I define it at this point is just the talent level. You know, we've got 30 plus Hall of Famers who played in the Negro Leagues prior to Jackie Robinson. If we use some of the criteria, such as a balanced schedule and you know, some of the other things that that you might want to consider to be Major League coverage, well, then you're bumping into racial bias, and the Negro Leagues didn't necessarily have the benefit or the luxury of being able to play 154 game balanced schedule, that they had to operate much differently. And so, you know, we got to take those two different ideas. The fact that there are these incredibly talented, some of the best players in the world playing in the Negro National League and the Negro American League, with the idea that they don't have the funding to play a full 154 game balanced schedule. And you know, you have to make a decision that's just, because it was unjust that they weren't able to play in the major leagues at the time. So to me, you have to take all of those things into consideration. And when you look at the amount of talent that was in those leagues and on those teams, I think that that's what we have to consider. And I think that's what went into the decision.
I think Sean and Scott have summed up the summation of how we value and judge and provide criteria for judging the players and the Negro Leagues very well.
Yeah, I just follow up on what Scott said about the record keeping. I'm surrounded by books here, you know, that millions of dollars of efforts have gone into filling with statistics over the last 150 years, and there just hasn't been that investment. Not to diminish anything that Scott or Larry have done, but you know, you had the Sporting News, you had Reach Publishing, you had the Spalding Guides, you know, all publishing white Major League statistics at that time. And you know, even the Baseball Encyclopedia in 1969 was a multi-million-dollar effort to compile and produce, you know, statistics for those leagues. And so I'm hoping that, you know, our publication and what Seamheads has done will be kind of a starting point for more research, more effort, more, you know, interest in creating, you know, that record, those records of those games and those players.
Indeed, an important a missed opportunity to ignore the Negro Leagues back then, but we're catching up now. Again, lots of great questions coming in through the chat, and I want to get to some of them. Shout out to Daryl, who is chiming in from Paris, France, this morning, I believe, in France. Bonjour. We were glad that you're able to join us. But Ryan asks, and Larry, you alluded to this earlier, and you didn't want to give a percentage, so I'm going to twist your arm and maybe give a little percentage now. But Ryan was asking about when the data will be considered complete, or is it going to just continue to be an ongoing process? So go ahead and give us your best shot, where you think we are, and what would make you feel comfortable with. You're probably never comfortable with the complete.
No,
what completeness will be, but just whatever your thoughts are on that.
My answer is we're in extra innings. The data is complete. We have mined every newspaper possible. I've inputted every box score I can into my personal database. However, I still find errors, inputting errors in my numbers. I don't remember every game that I put in. Sometimes when I run integrity checks, I found out that I put that same game in twice. So I had to delete that game. Or I might find that the total hits for a team don't equal the total hits given up by a pitcher. I run all type of integrity checks to ensure that the data is accurate. And so for every win, you must have a loss. And so I have to balance my spreadsheet. And so the data is complete. However, when you find an error, it may take 30 to 60 minutes to correct it. When you got 4 walks and only 3 base on balls. So it takes a while to drill down and find out who made the mistake. And sometimes the data from the newspaper is not correct. They may only list 8 batters instead of 9, but you have enough information from the game text to find out who that missing batter is and where he batted in the lineup. There are all types of formulas that we develop. Where I can look at any box score on any game, any day, And I can tell you who made the last out of that game without going to that ball game, just by doing mathematical formulas. So the data is complete, but the integrity checks are not. And so we don't want to give the public bad data and be like Major League Baseball, who has put out some questionable data. I mean, who won the RBI title between Roger Maris and Jim Gentile in 1961? So we all make mistakes. The paper provides incorrect information, and I take that incorrect information and I put it into my database. And then when the ledger doesn't balance, I got to find out who was wrong. So as Scott knows and Sean knows, I mean, you could have two papers who will report different information on the same game, and you have to figure out which one of those papers is correct. And keep in mind that during this period, a lot of information was called in or sent in by telegraph. That's another opportunity for a mistake. And then you take the data and you have to typeset it for the printer. That's another opportunity for the mistake. And as I learned how to print in high school, that print chart is upside down and backwards. You have to learn how to read upside down and backwards before you can put it into the printer. And so there's a lot of room for error before it gets to you, before it gets to the newspaper, before it gets to you. So the data is complete, and we just need to massage it and make sure it's right.
Well, I think I have breaking news, Larry, because I've got some more box scores, bud. Okay. I think, you know what, I think in a general sense, I think Larry's correct that we have the majority of what we're going to find. But just talking to Gary last week, we were sort of pondering how much more is out there. And we believe that there are still hundreds of box scores to be found. Not thousands, but hundreds. I think in particular, Larry, as you well know, the Negro American League from 37 to 48 is that's a tough nut to crack. And I think we've made some headway. I've got a couple dozen new ones that are going to be added to the database soon. But it's hard work because we've exhausted most of the digitized newspapers online. And so now it's, you have to go into these small towns like Meadville, Pennsylvania and Erie, Pennsylvania. The Negro American League played a lot of neutral site games in the late 30s and 40s. Mm-hmm. And then, as you know, Chicago's coverage really went into the toilet. The Tribune, they used to cover the Chicago American Giants very well in the teens and in the 20s, great box scores. They still covered the games in the 40s, but the box scores disappeared. And that was the biggest city in the Negro American League, arguably the most, well, not the most important, Kansas City was, but so the coverage really went downhill. But I think we're going to find more than, I think you're going to be surprised. Let me put it that way. I've got confidence in this.
Okay.
Well, Sean.
I was going to say my main comment is I want to know when the AL and NL stats are going to be complete, because I've probably made thousands of changes to those over the last 20 years. So it's certainly not just a Negro League issue.
Oh yeah, and Larry, talking about the difficulties, I've had to experience those in terms of interpreting the dates and figuring out the data discrepancies. What we try to do is get as many different game stories for different box scores and different game stories to try to untangle those. And ultimately, you got to make a decision, trust your instincts, and go with it. And then, throw your ego into the garbage can that if 5 years from now, somebody finds a box score that clarifies our understanding of what occurred in that game, we understand that we will make a correction. But I mean, a big part of what Seamheads has done, Larry, is we've taken some of your work and we've taken some of our new research and we have audited this stuff. So we're not talking about the stuff you're talking about. I think we have fixed that. I think what's being presented both at Seamheads and especially at baseballreference.com with the big audience is data that has been audited to the best of our ability. And I think that's why it was, the time was right for this to occur.
Well, I wanted to ask you, you alluded to it, and I was going to ask both you, Scott, and Sean. And Sean, I'll start with you, just how nimble you all are to be able to address updates in the data.
I mean, we haven't done that yet. We just got it out the door 2 weeks ago. So we're already behind what Seamheads has. I think there was a 1945 and 46 have some updates that we're not currently displaying, I believe. And so we're taking a breath, and then we're going to see, how quickly do we want to start, pushing out updates, and do we want to do it on a quarterly basis, maybe semi-annual, similar to what we've done with RetroSheet updates in the past. And so, I think we're definitely committed to maintaining the data set. We have a long-term commitment to, in our relationship to Seamheads, and we fully expect to, I know it's very important to them that we're not falling behind what kind of the leading edge of this research is, and we fully intend to, to honor our commitment to keep up and make sure things are as best that we can display them.
Very good. Yeah, go ahead, Larry.
I see a question from someone named Larry. In terms of doing integrity checks on data, are you prioritizing the higher profile players? Absolutely not. All players are treated equally. That was never even suggested with any of the researchers that we talked to. Every player is treated equally. We don't focus on Hall of Famers or potential Hall of Famers.
Thanks for making that point. Although we know that the general public probably will be more interested in those players, but it's important to get the whole record correct. So more questions from the chat. Going back a little, Tara has a two-part question about exhibition games, especially that exhibition games were a big part of the Negro League schedules. To what extent were they included? The second part was about the Monarchs in particular, when in the early 30s they didn't have a league affiliation. How are their specific records considered during that time period? And I guess we'll either Scott or Larry can start.
Let me jump. I think you brought up an interesting, important point of discussion, and that would be the independent teams, such as the Homestead Grays in the 1920s, the Kansas City Monarchs, who had been a member of the Negro National League in the 20s, and then they were an independent team in the early 30s, and then they rejoined the Negro American League after 37. And there was always a handful, maybe one or two independent teams who operated outside of the confines of the leagues, of the league structure, and they played against the teams from both leagues. They were often among the very best teams in the country. And what do we do with that? The way, the mantra that I always repeat to myself is that we have to stop trying to define the Negro Leagues using the same parameters that we use for the white major leagues. It's a totally different animal. That in the metaphor or that I would use is that is college sports is the closest thing that kind of help us understand the place that the Homestead Grays or the Kansas City Monarchs held in the baseball world. You have the Big Ten, and you can have the Pac-10, and then you would have an independent team like Notre Dame, and they were eligible to play for the championship and considered one of the best teams in the country. And that's kind of like the Homestead Grays and the Kansas City Monarchs were in the Negro Leagues. They were independent, but they were as good as the best teams in both of those leagues. And I think, and I hope that we can continue to have a conversation about possibly including the 1931 Homestead Grays in the data set, as well as the Monarchs. I mean, listen, if you look at the history of the East-West League All-Star Game, they had players from the independent teams in those games at least 3 or 4 times. And to me, that makes the argument that they were considered on par, if not as, definitely on par with the clubs that were in the league. And I would argue that we need to carve out a place and let the Negro Leagues kind of define themselves, and that's how they operated. So I hope that's the conversation that we're going to continue to have.
Yeah, we in terms of our launch, we did not include those teams or those games in our records. I think we're open to considering that and taking a look at that at some point. I think another thing we, in talking with Bob Kendrick a little bit before the launch, he was concerned that we were, we wanted to be very clear that this was not the total story for these players. These players played hundreds and thousands of games outside of the games that we're displaying on the site. And so, we tried to add a lot of context. Larry wrote a piece for us, and Bob Kendrick and Joe Poznansky wrote a piece for us, and a number of families did as well. And so we tried to make sure that we added context outside of the statistics so that people could understand. A lot of people don't know very much at all about these leagues, and they're not SABR members. They're not, reading books about this. They're not studying this. And so I think, hopefully we've dramatically expanded the audience, for these players and people becoming aware of them. And so we've tried to. I think we have 10 or 12 articles on the site that we're presenting, from family members, from experts, researchers, from some current players. Adam Jones wrote a piece for us to kind of help put it in context. And so, we've tried to lay out a lot of the history that went along and why this is not the complete story and why you should learn more and where you can go to learn more. And so, both those articles, and then we also have a podcast series that Dr. Doswell was kind enough to record an episode for us we're in Larry as well. So we're really trying to make sure that people understand that expanded context that these leagues have, or these players have.
I was muted because the Cardinals just hit another home run, which is good news for me, and the fireworks just went off. But I appreciate what you said, Sean, because it is nuanced and people need to understand that nuance. But I admit the media and folk who call me at the museum aren't getting that nuance because they want to hear about the great players, like our question in the chat from Bob, who was asking about debates between understanding the comparisons between players like Oscar Charleston and Ty Cobb, which apparently have been debated over SABR. And although Larry has proclaimed the stats complete, obviously there's nuances to that. And how do we settle the arguments about who was the better player, or maybe that's not the point, or is it? I'll let Sean answer first, and then anyone else who wants to chime in.
Well, I would say, the arguments are the fun. That's why I've been to 20 SABR conventions, so I can argue with people in the bar after the, after the talks have happened and we can discuss them. So I think Baseball Reference has never been about settling arguments. We're about helping you argue better, I think, is probably how we look at it. And so, I think a large part of, what we're trying to do here is give people the information. And so we've done things like, we have our neutralize tool on StatHead, where you could take Josh Gibson and put him in the 2000 Coors and see how many home runs he might have hit over his career. And I think it's like 872 or something like that, playing a full career in Coors Field. Or you can take, we have per 162 stats. So players who played different lengths of seasons, you can compare. I think Josh Gibson, I looked it up, he had, it was I think 196 RBIs per 162 games in his career, and so pretty phenomenal numbers. So I think those sorts of things, we're trying to provide that context and allow people to make those arguments for themselves.
Very
well, jump in here.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, I still think the data is basically complete. The research has been completed. We're still trying to finalize what we do. And it's important that we have these numbers. Baseball is statistically a sport that we like to argue, and we know numbers without even putting names with them. If I say 24 or 42 or 21, y'all know who I'm talking about. If I say 714 or 755 or batting average of 361, I don't have to put a name with it. That's the beauty of baseball. We can throw a number out there and we already know where you're going with this subject. And so the beauty of what we're trying to do here with Seam Heads and baseballreference.com is to introduce the public to new heroes and new legends that you just haven't known about or heard of. I mean, I have a report of all the players who played one game in the Negro Leagues. It's called my Moonlight Graham report. So I'm having so much fun here, it's ridiculous. So, and when I say Moonlight Graham to the SABR audience, they know exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm ready for any argument at a barbershop, pool hall, juke joint, speak easy, or your local bar. Bring it on. I got my numbers, and I love to have a beer with you and talk about who are the greatest ball players who ever played the game.
Very good, very good. Along the similar lines, and anyone can answer this. I'll start with Scott, though. There are a couple questions in regards to the Baseball Hall of Fame and consideration of players. Do you think that this work will have any great impact on those deliberations with the possibility of considering more inductees?
Yeah, well, I certainly hope so. I think that it would be nice to revisit that now that we have a credible data set to look at. You know, one of the things is you look at who's been inducted and you look at their statistics, and I think the historians have done an amazing job over the past 50 years. I mean, I think that's one of the things one of my takeaways. Are there some players that I would like to see reconsidered? Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm kind of a John Beckwith guy and a Dick Lundy. I'm a Candy Jim Taylor, I think needs consideration. There's got to be another dozen or two that should at least be considered and have informed debates and conversations now that we have a data set with fielding statistics and all of these different things. So, you know, I think the stories are the most, you know, that's the fun part of Negro League Baseball. That's what drew me into it. But now we have a data set that can help accentuate those stories. And so hopefully there will be an opportunity to consider some more candidates for the Hall of Fame. I think it would be a good thing for all of us.
So I do have a question. There's a couple more questions in the chat in a few minutes we have left, but we note, Scott and Sean, that you all are applying to some of these stats, some analytical metrics. What's the value of that? I mean, Larry's just for the most part trying to get runs, RBIs, hits, and errors, and the true outcomes. But what, you know, with the nuanced nature of these stats, what's the value of trying to add analytics to that?
You might as well ask me, why do I breathe? If you know, I mean, that's just what I do, I guess. You know, I would say, you know, I think the interesting, so we've done a number of things. We're using Michael Humphrey's fielding DRA number for fielding stats, and like Dobie Moore shows up, I think, as the greatest fielder in terms of runs saved in Negro League history. And you know, so for us, that's just part of the fun is trying to use some of these analysis, and we're applying them, you know, to the white major leagues of the time in a similar way. And so, you know, I think it, you know, for me, part of the fun is some players who you might have overlooked, who maybe have numbers. I don't have any on the tip of my tongue right now, but who were, you know, oftentimes there are players who maybe were consistent across a wide variety of skills who maybe are undervalued a little bit. And so kind of, you know, making us see those players with a new set of eyes, I think, is interesting. You know, one flaw in what we've done that is going in, Kevin Johnson at Seam Heads has been very, you know, upfront with this, and like really wants us to take a look at this, is we haven't applied any park factors to any of these stadiums yet. And so you may see some fluctuation in WAR numbers, you know, things like OPS plus, ERA plus, because we haven't really we haven't either had access to the data yet or have taken the time to actually calculate a park factor for a particular ballpark and applied that to the games that were played in that ballpark. So that's you know, I think there's one of the exciting things. I always felt like this is going off a little bit, but you know, like there's all this new work that can be done now. If you're a young person or an old person like me who wants to do more research and learn, you know, new things, there's a lot of things that you can do now that, you know, that are available to you, where maybe you felt before like there wasn't a lot of baseball research, you know, left for you to do it. I think it'd be pretty gratifying work to do that work.
Hey, Sean, I'm sorry, can I articulate the challenge with the ballpark factors that I know Kevin's working on? Now, let me explain this for the audience. That, like, in 1943, you had 16 white major league teams playing in 10 different cities and 14 different ballparks, and it was a balanced schedule. in 1943 in the Negro Leagues, the two Negro Leagues, you had 13 teams playing official league games in 71 different ballparks that summer. Okay, so they played in Yankee Stadium, Wrigley Field, Comiskey Park, Shibe, Griffith, and DC, but a lot of their games were played at neutral site locations, played in minor league ballparks and occasionally college and even high school fields on occasion. So that is part of the challenge and that we're going to have to wrestle with when you talk about having analytics that might be apples to apples. So it was a totally different universe. And Sean, you're right. This, to me, this is the most exciting thing to happen to baseball history since the publication of the Macmillan Encyclopedia in '69. That's how big I think this news is, that this is a Major League Baseball's decision, and Sean presenting this on this huge platform. This is huge, and it's going to open up a bunch of different areas of research for SABR members. And I think that the new opportunities are only limited by our creativity, that we can go and get the jersey numbers and add that to the site, especially for the 30s and 40s, and in particular the 40s. We're going to be able to go and add jersey numbers. You're going to be able to have a uniform database, hopefully. Game logs. We could probably put together at least partial lefty-righty splits eventually, especially if there's a complete game involved. So, I feel like this is the beginning of the third act of Negro League research. It's taken us 50 years to get here. And, everybody that has written books and written articles, they're part of this. So many times when we were working on this, we would go back to the oral histories that had been published by, say, John Holloway, just to confirm little details. So this is a big moment, and it's maybe the beginning of the next phase. And there's going to be a lot of really cool opportunities. And we will find a couple more games, Larry. We're going to make you proud, man. I know this. So it's an ongoing thing, and people are going to see research in real time on sportsreference.com, which is that's a pretty cool opportunity.
Well, I like to say that the analytics have really empowered my creativity. I mean, I love analyzing data. I mean, now I can show how many strikeouts per 9 innings Satchel Paige had and compare them to Nolan Ryan and Roger Clemens. I can show you the at-bats per home run and compare Josh Gibson's numbers to Hank Aaron and Barry Bonds. We can do those cross checks. That's what the new analytics have been able to provide for me. I run all type of reports. I got about 200 analytic reports that are very creative. I can show you who pitched the most games on Sunday. That was the big payday for Negro Leaguers. Who started the most games on Sunday? What did a left-handed hitter bat on the road if he played shortstop? All this available. I mean, I saw where there's only 2 Major League ball players who pitched, who had more complete games than wins. That's an incredible stat. So I ran that same report for the Negro Leaguers. I mean, that's confidence that a manager has, that he said, I'm gonna put this man out here. He may not win, but he's gonna complete this game. That's an incredible stat to have. So I love doing stats. I did another report to see what Willie the Devil Wells batted on Sunday. I wanted to see what he did on the Sabbath. All this information is available. And this is gonna open up a new awareness and opportunity for fans to really, enjoy what we know to be a wonderful part of baseball Americana.
Very good. And we are at the top of the hour, and there's much more to discuss. I want to recognize our mutual friend, Ted Noor, and Dr. Heafy, who also had a quick question. But with folks who want you to follow along, go back and look at the chat and answer a few of the questions that didn't get answered. Scott, your comment about the impact of these statistics since 1969. It's gotten a lot of reaction in the chat. And of course, in '69, they landed on the moon. So here we are with another new frontier being explored. So we are officially out of time, and you guys have been illuminating. I will indulge our host just allow each of you to have one just final parting comment before we dismiss. We'll start with Sean.
Well, thank you for having me. This whole project has been a tremendous honor for us. Several of our, team members, and I certainly feel the same, feel like this is the most gratifying thing they've gotten to work on, at any job they've had. So it's been an honor to work with each of you and have an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. And I look forward to continuing that relationship as we go on.
Thank you, Scott.
Well, I fell into this like 10 or 15 years ago. So I'm just really blessed to be part of this. One of the things really quick, we're talking about batting averages and home runs and earned run averages, but a big part of the database that hasn't gotten a lot of attention is the biographical element. The fact that one of the difficult things that we have done at Seamheads, and I know Larry has worked on this, is finding out who these men and women were. When and where were they born? Did they go to college? A lot of them went to college. Where did they go to school? When did they pass away and where? Where are they buried? What was their height and weight? So it's been a lot of time spent in the census records and the military records. And the net result is, I came into this a little bit too late to meet a lot of Negro League players. I've only met perhaps a dozen in my life, but I have communicated and talked to a lot of grandchildren and great-grandchildren of former Negro League players. And I know how special this is to see something on the internet about their relative. And I think that is a big part of my enjoyment, is the pride that they have learning about family. And that is an important part of this. So thanks for having me on. Thank you.
Yeah, I had to echo that because that biographical material is the majority of the requests we get at the museum for sure. So a very important part. Mr. Lester, you get the last word.
Yes, I tried to marry the stats with the biographical material. I belong to a local genealogy club, and they helped me navigate through ancestry.com and other ancestry websites. So my goal is to find biographical information for every ball player, even the Moonlight Grahams of the world. I would like to give a shout out to Gary Ashwell as he goes through this transition without his mom. Also Dwayne Stivers, Bill Plott, who mined a lot of data from Southern newspapers that we could not get through in a library alone. John Hallway really started the first venue of calculating and tabulating stats by hand before we had computers. And of course, my dear friend and late mentor, Dick Clark, I owe him a debt of gratitude. So let's not forget the people who brought us to where we are at today. And thank you for having us on this Zoom broadcast.
And an excellent way to conclude. We thank you all. Please, all of you, thank the panel. We thank SABR for making this possible. We're continuing with the Summer of SABR and the 50th anniversary of SABR. As we continue on, I know we've eaten into the next session's time, but I hope you all enjoyed it and found it rewarding. Thank you all, and we turn it over to Scott Bush.
Dr. Raymond Doswell, thank you so much for joining us and being our moderator. No question that we could have scheduled that for 2 hours and still not covered everything that everybody wanted to cover. So I want to thank you. I want to thank our panelists again, Sean Forman, Larry Lester, and Scott Simkus. That was really fabulous, and can't wait to share that session with the general public. It is time for our annual business meeting, so we're going to be upgrading the board into co-host roles and getting all of them to turn on their videos so that we can call that meeting to order. So bear with us as that occurs. But board members, as you get added as co-hosts, go ahead and turn on your video, and we will get started.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, the gang's all here. So I would like to call the meeting to order. I am Mark Armour, the SABR board president, and I would like to introduce my fellow board members. Maybe they could wave in case you don't know who they all are. Leslie Heafy is our vice president. FX Flynn is our treasurer. Todd Leibowitz is our secretary. And we have 4 directors: Tyrone Brooks, Dan Levitt, Allison Levin, and Bill Nowlin. So the primary purpose of this annual meeting is to give you the opportunity to hear from us about the state of SABR and to ask any questions you might have. We have a lot to cover, and we're going to make it fairly brisk, I hope. In the absence of our annual banquet, we will announce the Bob Davis Award towards the end of the hour. And then after that, we have additional important content from Scott, so please stick around. So first up, I will introduce our Executive Director and CEO, Scott Bush.
Thank you, Mark. Fellow SABR members, it's a privilege to be addressing you for the 3rd time at the annual business meeting as SABR CEO. And I, of course, look forward to having the opportunity to do so in person at SABR 50 next summer. I'm going to use my time today to cover a few of the highlights since June of last year. This year's annual report is available on sabr.org for your review, and I believe we'll drop a link here into the chat shortly. And I encourage you to check it out for a detailed summary of what the organization has done over the last year. Without a doubt, the central theme of the last year for SABR was energy, and that energy was evident throughout the organization. SABR Virtual, which began with the Stay Home with SABR initiative in April of 2020, has hosted hundreds of chapter and research committee events, as well as a virtual SABR Day and a virtual analytics conference. The nature of this programming has allowed members from across the country to attend, and SABR has uploaded the video from more than 100 of these events, which has expanded our research library. I'm thankful to the chapter leaders and research committee chairs that brought their energy to make these events happen. The staff and I welcome the challenge of creating virtual programming that does not detract from local meetings as we begin gathering together in person again. In addition, a redesigned sabr.org was launched in June of 2020 and saw a 10% increase in traffic year over year. The focus of the design is to allow visitors to search the breadth and depth of SABR's research. These assets include the Bio Project, Endgames Project, Oral History Collection, and articles from the Baseball Research Journal and the National Pastime. Currently, all issues of these flagship publications are now available as PDFs. This is very recent. So if you've been looking for certain journals, look again, because they should be there. And we will add all of the articles into the search engine over time, meaning that that search functionality will pull all of those for you rather than you having to know your way around. In addition, we plan to make other primary source materials in SABR's possession available. These include the Sporting News player cards, Weiss player questionnaires, and the Rucker and Audison photo archives. The completion of these efforts will make sabr.org an even more amazing first stop for baseball research projects. There's more energy around SABR membership than has been seen in many years. The organization has increased its membership roster by 1,099 members as of June 1st, and we currently boast 6,886 members, which is more members than we've had since 2009. This figure includes more than 1,000 students and young professionals. The staff and I are excited to continue this growth and push SABR back to 7,000 members and beyond. SABR's publishing efforts continue to be both a great way to highlight the organization as well as the expertise of our members. In addition to our 3 annual flagship journals, SABR published 10 books in the last year, including SABR 50 at 50 through the University of Nebraska Press. SABR also continues to actively publish outside of physical media at sabr.org. In this space, the Games Project and Bio Project added more than 800 total new entries to their projects, and SABR also published the 50 at 50 web series in support of the book of the same name. I'm grateful to everyone who supports our publishing efforts, in particular Cecilia Tan, Bill Nowlin, and the rest of the editorial board, as well as Rory Costello and Gregory H. Wolf, the co-directors of the Bio Project, and Steve Weiner and John Fredland of the Games Project. Finally, I'd like to recognize the SABR staff. The last 15 months have presented myriad challenges to our group, and they've handled them with aplomb, even without the chance to see each other in person. Jacob Pomrenke, our director of editorial content, is familiar to most of you. Jacob, could you wave for everybody quickly? There we go. We have also added Scott Carter to the team as executive vice president. Scott, can you help folks find you? There we go. Thank you. And finally, our most recent addition to the staff is Chanel Zapata, our community engagement manager. Chanel, there we go. Many of you have probably already been in touch with Chanel, so it's good to be able to put a face with a name. I'm very excited for this group to spend more and more time together and for them to get the chance to go get out and see members as well. In closing, I'd also like to thank the SABR Board of Directors for their support through the last year. Navigating a constantly shifting landscape has taken a lot of patience, but it has also required a lot of trust as we've constantly had to make adjustments and try new ideas. So thank you. Like everyone else, I'm looking forward to seeing you in Baltimore next summer. Mark?
Thank you, Scott. So I'll be pretty brief here. So one of the duties of the board president is to preside over this meeting every year at the convention. And this is my second year. I've been reminded of this a few times by friends, but this is my second year in this role and my second year chairing a Zoom meeting. So I hope this never happens again. And I don't think it was my fault. So the job of the board in general is to ensure that SABR is on a path that will allow us to meet our goals and objectives and to safeguard our short and long-term financial health. So way back in February 2020, before the world went sideways, we began work on a strategic plan, which should be completed later this summer. In the meantime, most of what SABR, and by which I mean the national SABR, actually does, most of what you see, the events, the great website, our publications, all the member outreach, those are the responsibility of Scott and the SABR staff. And for the most part, come from the brains of Scott and SABR staff. So if you are happy with something that SABR is doing, chances are very strong that the thanks should be directed to them. On that note, the entire board is extremely pleased with the work of Scott and Jacob and Scott and Chanel. Not only is the ship running as smoothly as it ever have, but I think we need to allot them degree of difficulty points for doing this while working from their homes. Honestly, a truly remarkable job for the past 15 months. Some of them hadn't even met each other until pretty recently. Our next in-person board meeting will be in Phoenix in November, and we look forward to meeting Chanel and Scott Carter for the very first time, and also seeing Scott and Jacob. So it's been a great year for SABR, I think. They always are, but this one in particular, this is our 50th anniversary celebration. It's been going on. I hope you've been reading all the monthly content on our website. Thanks to Jacob for such an outstanding job on that presentation. And best of all, the recent inspiring efforts that have shown a brighter light on the Negro Leagues and the records that's been going on the past several months. This is our golden age. There's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of opportunities. If you're new at this, there's as much work to do today as there really was, way back in the beginning. And as much as we will always be a research organization, I've heard from many people recently that we are also very much a social organization. Last week, I met some SABR members at a Mariners game, and it was glorious. It was a beautiful evening of baseball and friends and beer. Local chapters have begun meeting. The Women in Baseball Conference is planning to be in person in September. And this is a very big part of who we are. So with that in mind, SABR 50 is in Baltimore next summer, the long-awaited SABR 50. The record attendance for a convention, I would like to point out, is 806 people, which is what we had in New York in 2017. And I hope to see all of you there in Baltimore. So next up is FX Flynn, our board treasurer.
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to announce that SABR is now a $1.5 million organization. If you look at our balance sheet, our assets and liabilities come out to about 1.5 million. So that's really fantastic news. We're in terrific shape financially. I'm hoping that you have all read the report that I provided in the materials. I'd just like to highlight that we've made an important decision to make some modifications in the way that we're going to be doing our financial reporting in the future, because we've decided that it's time for us to perform a full-blown audit, which is no longer a minor cost item. It's something that's going to cost us in the neighborhood of $25,000 to get done. And there's some preliminary work that we need to do in order to get everything aligned and in accordance with standard accounting principles. So our first effort is beginning this summer. We're doing a compliance, and then next year we'll be doing a full review, and then an independent audit will be conducted in 2023 on the 2022 materials. So I believe future reports from your treasurer are going to start to look a little bit different than the ones that I've been presenting to you for the past 20 years. And this is a good thing, because we've matured, and we've made some pretty big decisions about how we are carrying our assets and our investments. And Scott has some big plans for approaching large foundations to seek support for some big projects. And in order to do that, we really need to show that we could get by for a year without getting $1 of revenue. And so we're making some significant changes in order to be able to do that. And we're very close to being able to do it. It's amazing how well the society was able to navigate through the pandemic. And I can't really begin to thank all of you who dug into your wallets and supported us, because it truthfully made the job of the board and the job of our staff a lot easier. We all had breathing room, and we all had breathing room because of you. And I think I know that I have always been motivated to serve this organization because I enjoyed so much the work that was being done by the researchers, enjoyed so much the times getting together with folks or being in touch with folks around baseball in all of its manifest ways of being in our lives. And I know that everybody on the board and the people on the staff feel the same way. So, so with that said, I would like to ask, I'll be available during the Q&A that's going to be coming up shortly to take specific questions. And I hope that if I feel that between the report or the detailed report, I'll be able to say, if you look at that, the answer is there. Also in there is my phone number and my email address, and I am perfectly willing to take up any questions individually that folks may have. So anyway, it's been an honor once again to serve as your treasurer for this past year. And I am thrilled with the state of the society, and I hope you all feel the same way. Thank you.
Thank you, FX. That was great. So next up, we have the teller's report, which hopefully Todd can address.
I will do my best. Thank you, Mark. Hi, everybody. Look forward to seeing you all in person. This is the part of the meeting that I know that you all most look forward to because of the excitement and the anticipation of hearing verbally the information that you've known for the past 7 weeks, which is that Mark Armour has been reelected president. I have been reelected secretary, and we welcome Tara Krieger to the board. Tara's been a SABR member since 2005 and a contributing author to BioProject and other publications. She's also served as a new member ambassador and on the SABR Research Award Committee, and is a frequent attendee at the National Convention and the Casey Stengel chapter events in New York City. And we look forward to having her join us. And we are sad to see Tyrone go, and we very much appreciated working with him. And thank you, Tyrone, for your service. I also want to thank the Tellers Committee, Stephen Barnes, Stacy Flores, and Eric Simonson for certifying the results on May 4th in a virtual meeting. And a big thank you to the Nominations Committee, Anthony Salazar, Lorene Kennard, and Clayton Truder for helping in preparing the candidate statements. We had more than 1,000 votes this year, so excellent turnout. Thank you all for participating. It's important to have as much participation as we can in this process. And I look forward to seeing you all next year in Baltimore.
Thank you, Todd. And yes, we are all very happy to be joined by Tara. She is officially a member of the board at the conclusion of this meeting. That's why you don't see her yet. But you'll see her next year. You probably all know her, so it doesn't matter. But before we get to the Q&A, Allison is going to jump in and say a few words.
Tyrone, I knew you in passing before you joined the board 2 years ago, and now I and everybody on the board has the privilege of calling you a friend. From committee work to board meetings, you added such depth of experience, a fresh perspective, a love of baseball and SABR that helped to frame so many meaningful discussions. To keep this brief, and for fear of it starting to sound a little like a memorial, I'll just say I know I speak for the board when I tell you we will miss you and want you to know this isn't goodbye. You are and always will be a valuable leader in SABR whose expertise and passion we plan to call on as we move forward. On a more personal note, I expect to see you in Baltimore next year, since I still need your guidance on my quest to find the best crab cake. To wrap up, in honor of your service on the board, it is my privilege to virtually present you with the memento that the national office put together. So before we get to that, I just want to thank you for your service on the SABR board and say, on behalf of the entire board, don't be a stranger.
Thank you so much. Truly, it's been an honor and a pleasure to serve with all of you. And I definitely look forward to staying engaged with SABR throughout my time here, and just having a chance to continue to work with all of you and continue to meet all of our members. So thank you so much.
So Jacob, were you going to share your screen? Yes, here we go. So this is the plaque that will be sent to Tyrone, I think next week. I think there was some disagreement about what your address was. So we need to, once Jacob figures out where you want this sent, it'll be on its way. And Allison is 100% correct about how much you mean to the board, and will continue to. I spent a lot of time with you in San Diego, and I hope I can do the same in Baltimore, because that's Eddie Murray country. That's Tyrone's favorite player.
Definitely. Hopefully at some point, hopefully maybe during the course of SABR 50, having a chance, hoping to meet him during that time. But if it doesn't happen earlier, so.
Okay.
And thank you so much for the plaque. That is pretty incredible.
Great. Well, thank you, Tyrone. Thank you, Allison. And the next part of this is the question and answer. And I'm not sure how this is supposed to go. Scott, do you have questions people have sent in, or how's that work?
We had a few questions that were solicited via email in advance, not many. So if folks currently watching have any more, feel free to put those into the chat. We'll do what we can to get to them. And I'll share the two that I think are relevant here that were submitted via email. The first is asking whether we've thought of having a SABR convention during the Men's College World Series in Omaha. And happy to have others weigh in, but I'll share some of the various conversations that the board's had in my time, and as well as some of the survey responses that we've received about convention. The board and the staff is always sensitive to the price of convention. A concern with putting on convention in conjunction with a major event such as the Men's College World Series would be hotel price, and how that could drive the total cost for the attendees. Certainly not out of the question, but that would be a concern up front. The other item, as cool as the Men's College World Series is, one of the biggest responses we get when we survey about convention is members are looking for the opportunity to go to a big league game. That's a big driver in terms of what folks are looking for. So two potential flags there, but certainly not out of the question. And I'll let anybody else weigh in who would like. Seeing none, I'll keep it moving. The other question that came in advance was about chapters and both chapter activity and how we are supporting chapters. And I'm happy to announce or share rather a couple of things. When we brought Chanel Zapata onto the staff, a big driver in shaping her role with the organization was providing chapter leaders with a consistent conduit into the staff. And we had, over time, that role of liaising with chapter leaders had really shifted towards the board. And specifically, Leslie Heafy had been driving that for quite some time, and she's done a really great job. Personally, and chatting with the board, I feel like it's very important that the staff take that role on. And so what we've been doing since we brought Chanel on is doing a review of both chapter standards, but also best practices, and also looking at what tools and resources we can do out of headquarters, a better job of sharing with chapters to further support them. And Chanel and I have been exchanging drafts of various documents and things like that over the last couple of weeks. And so I'm expecting that we'll start to get that in front of Leslie and and some of our chapter leaders in the near future, at which point I would expect you'll start to hear a little bit more from us about this issue. So certainly something that we take very seriously and we want to do a lot more with. And with a 4-person staff, we're always stretched, but we're going to make this a priority. I got another question about convention, came in via the chat. How far in advance are you planning for specific sites for the annual convention? Mark, do you want to take that one, and I'll keep looking for questions here?
Sure. We generally are somewhere between a year and 2 years out. That usually. The tricky thing is, I mean, we probably would benefit in some ways, maybe in terms of price, for example, if we went out further than that. But the thing that holds us back is always that we ideally would like to have the major league schedule available to us so that we don't, for example, say, let's go to Kansas City and then find out after the schedule comes out that we can't go that time. So without question, the most significant part of our plan is locking in a hotel. And there are some places where we can't really say we want to go to this city unless we have that hotel locked in. So that keeps us from going out too far in advance. That said, in the time I've been on the board, we've certainly had discussions about the best cities. And so that, you know, when it comes time for Scott and others to, you know, push forward and start to negotiate, that we have, you know, our sort of short list of where we want Scott to look. I have to say that it's been kind of boring the last few years because the answer has been that our next convention is in Baltimore for 3 years now. So we haven't had to look that far ahead, but I would expect, assuming that the world continues to improve, that we will start to talk about SABR 51 sometime, you know, probably over the course of the next, you know, several months. But it's usually the hotel that locks us, that keeps us from jumping too soon.
Go ahead, FX.
Yeah. You know, having watched the process of choosing a city for the convention for the last 20 years, things have really changed in the last 3 to 5 years. You know, it used to be that we would be able to make arrangements with a hotel for one weekend or another and make the decision when the baseball schedule came out in mid-September. That's virtually impossible right now, and it's also true that commitments to the hotels are much more significant financially. Another problem, you might say, well, but we're SABR, so we should just tell baseball where we're going to be, and they will make sure that there's a game there that weekend. No, we have been down that path. There are some of us on the board who thoroughly understand what actually goes on and what is actually possible. And about the best we can do would be to have a ball club say, well, here are our top priorities, and oh yeah, SABR's going to come and they would like to be here on this date. Well, most baseball teams only get their first 2 priorities at best, and some of them don't even get that. So, and then you might say, well, why don't we Chicago is great. Why don't we go to Chicago every year? You got the Cubs or you got the White Sox. You can go to Milwaukee, you can go to the Brewers. Well, so we set up a whole convention to go to Chicago, and guess what? The Cubs and the White Sox were both out of town that weekend. So it's pretty crazy, and unfortunately there aren't any good answers, and we are not an 800-pound gorilla in the Major League Baseball offices yet.
So the only other thing I'd add there, FX, is from a hotel perspective, we're also a little bit victims of our own success, at least victims of our own energy. You know, the amount of interest from our research committees and others to hold programming during convention drives a lot of our needs in terms of ballroom space and other rooms that are not accommodations. And so that that shrinks the total population of hotels that can even fit our needs right up front in any whatever market we want to look at. So get back into questions here. We had a couple that were sort of similar, praising virtual events and hoping we continue them in some format, and asking if we'll continue to offer the Zoom tool for chapters. So 100% continue to offer the Zoom tool for chapters. That's not going away. And we are going to encourage our chapter leaders to think about what the right mix is for their chapter in terms of in-person and virtual, whether that's 25% or whatever, coming up with that thought process for themselves. And we're also going to look at how we could execute something that's more on a monthly basis, where everyone would be able to put it on their calendars in advance and know, okay, well, that Saturday of that month, SABR is going to do 1 or 2 hours on, well, we could have done 4 hours today with the Negro Leagues as Major Leagues. So, for example, doing something like that on a consistent basis and offering it to everybody. Getting into other questions, we've got an advocate for convention in Kansas City. We've got a question from Jeff Warner. We still do not know if the Orioles are home next year during convention. That's correct. But we have a hotel commitment that, for better or worse, we're going to have to fulfill at some point. So we got some dates on the calendar, and we're going to cross our fingers on that Orioles schedule, and we will adjust as necessary and as possible. And then I mentioned that the Nationals may be home. So that, I believe, is all the questions that we have.
That's okay. All of us, certainly Scott is available all the time. Well, during working hours. Okay, let's be clear. Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 Pacific. And the board, all of us are available if you have any questions that didn't get answered or you didn't think of until after the meeting. This is not, but back in the old days, I think in the pre-internet days, the business meeting was your only chance to pigeonhole the members of the board, but obviously you can pigeonhole the members of the board anytime you want now. So that is it for the Q&A. We have a couple additional things on the agenda, and the first of which is the Bob Davis Award. So I'm going to get right to that. The Bob Davis Award honors SABR members whose contributions to SABR and baseball reflect the ingenuity, integrity, and self-sacrifice of the founder and past president of SABR, L. Robert Bob Davis. Voluntary activities in the areas of administration and research are among those contributions considered. SABR's highest honor, the Bob Davis Award, was established by the Board of Directors in 1985 and is awarded each year at the annual convention. The awards committee this year was Larry McCray, Bill Lamb, and Peter Mancuso, who were the last 3 winners of the award. Because of the logistics involved this year, they asked me to present. The winner of the 2021 Bob Davis Award is Vince Gennaro. I will pause briefly for what would be a standing ovation. This is what Vince would be getting, and I'm hoping that next year in Baltimore, we will be able to actually give him a standing ovation, as well as Peter, who won last year over Zoom. So I'm going to say a few words, and then I'm going to ask Vince to talk. Vince is the author of Diamond Dollars, The Economics of Winning in Baseball, and host of a weekly national radio show, Behind the Numbers Baseball SABR Style, on Sirius XM. He has been a consultant to MLB teams and appears regularly on MLB Network. Vince served on SABR's board of directors from 2009 to 2019, including 4 terms as board president, where he acted as a calm, intelligent, inclusive leader. In this role, he co-founded the SABR Analytics Conference and helped establish SABR's involvement in the Rawlings Gold Glove Award voting process. He is also the architect of the Diamond Dollars Case Competition Series, which brings together students and baseball industry officials. More than 120 case competition participants have secured internships or permanent positions within Major League Baseball since 2012. He is a regular presenter at SABR's Analytics Conference and the National Convention, and is a 2-time winner of SABR's Doug Pappas Award for the top research presentation at the National Convention. It is with great personal pleasure that I present the 2021 Bob Davids Award to Vince Gennaro. Vince, you have the floor.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. Really appreciate this moment. I'm very grateful. I'm grateful to a lot of people. It makes me realize, what a wonderful gift SABR is for all of us, really. To have an opportunity to be in a community like this when you're passionate about baseball, to really indulge your baseball passion and interest, it's a real privilege to be associated with it. And I became a member in 1995, but I didn't really get deeply involved until I attended my first convention in Toronto. I want to say what it was at 2005-ish, something like that, or 6. And from there, I hadn't missed any. I want to say thank you first to Larry McCray, Bill Lamb, and Peter Mancuso, who are the awards committee that made this possible for me. And I also want to say thank you to that core group of board members. First of all, thank you to all the board members I served with, but that core group who I served with for most of my time, and of course, many of them are right here on the screen right now. It's Bill Nowlin and Leslie and FX and Todd and Emily Hawks. And I'm really grateful for the partnership we formed. I think we did this together. I couldn't possibly be here without those 5 people and really the rest of the board. So, I just want to say that I value this organization. It does tremendous work. I was here for the whole annual business meeting, so I had an opportunity to hear the great work that under Mark's leadership and Scott's leadership, the organization continues to do, really taking it to yet another level. And it's really a tribute to Scott and the room that the board has given Scott to really accelerate SABR in so many different ways. And thanks to Mark Armour for his leadership and what he's done in the 3 years he's been on the board and the 2 years that he's been the president. But thank you so much. This is really quite a privilege, and I know the award has actually arrived. So let me thank you, Danielle. So there is the Bob Davids Award. Thanks again, and I'm really privileged to join such an extraordinary list of members. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody in Baltimore.
Vince, we'd love you to turn your camera on real quick if you can and show off the award.
No, my camera's on. I'm just not on the center of the screen. My camera's been on the whole time. I don't know how to insert myself into the grid.
Oh, he's got to be a host for this.
Yeah.
So I wasn't the host, but I've been on the whole time. So thank you.
Thank you very much to Vince. I think just so everyone knows, even though Vince is mostly known as being a board member, and none of the people on the board had anything to do with this award. I'm sure that most of the people here are just as surprised as everybody else. He got the award because the membership believed that he deserved the award, and I completely agree with them. So looking forward to seeing Vince next year. So before we adjourn to happy hour, Scott has one more bit of content for you. So, and then I'll come back and adjourn the meeting. So Scott, take it away.
Thank you, Mark. And of note, we're not adjourned. So Todd, word for word in the minutes, of course. So before we get to the social hour, I want to take a moment actually and recognize a pretty significant milestone. And this is a surprise, I believe, to everyone what's about to occur. Earlier this year, Jacob Pomrenke celebrated, or at least hope he was celebrating, his 10th year working for SABR. And almost all of you know Jacob as our director of editorial content. In this role, Jacob writes and distributes our weekly newsletter, This Week in SABR, and is the webmaster for sabr.org, where he is responsible for updating new content and managing nearly 80,000 pages. Jacob also manages SABR's social media accounts and takes on media relations responsibilities for both the annual convention and the analytics conference. Jacob also acts as a great resource for our chapter leaders, research committee chairs, and other members. A member of SABR since he was 16 years old, Jacob is an expert on the Black Sox scandal and has made numerous contributions to the Black Sox Research Committee. As a token of appreciation for his sizable contributions to the organization over the last decade, SABR will be sending Jacob and his wife Tracy to Kansas City to visit the Negro League Baseball Museum later this year. Tracy was kind enough to help me keep this a secret and share that visiting the Negro League Baseball Museum is on Jacob's bucket list. I hope you will all turn on your cameras as we're about to go into the social hour anyway, and join me in celebrating our own Jacob Pomrenke.
Very cool. Thank you, Scott. That's that's pretty amazing. Yeah, no, it's been a great 10-year run, great however many 20+ year run as a member of SABR. So yeah, no, this is pretty awesome. And Negro League's museum has been on my bucket list for a long time. So had plans to get there last year for the 100th anniversary, and this will be pretty awesome. So thank you.
Mark, I don't think we have any more business.
Okay, so I just wanted to mention one last thing that when I first sent the proposed run through of this meeting to Scott, he had I was going to do the Bob Davis Award last, which we normally do. And Scott said, well, I think that since Jacob is actually playing a critical role in keeping this this meeting on track, we might not want to distract him. So we should do his thing last. And so that's why we didn't do the Davis Award last, which we normally do. So yes, I can't wait to see Jacob and buy him a beer for his 10 years. And with that, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned. Scott, what do we do now?
Great question. So at this moment, we are now going to hold a social hour in breakout rooms. You will all automatically be assigned to a room, but you will be able to move around to any room that you like. And I hope you enjoy spending some time with your fellow SABR members again, the best we can do for now. We are back tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern time with our international baseball session hosted by Chanel Zapata.